Right. Well, welcome everybody to another V DAO Community Voices. Today we have a special guest, Menno, who's a community member and DAO contributor, and Rob Avis, who is was the co-CEO of Fifth World and is now, well, he'll explain a little bit about that when he introduces himself. But yeah, definitely excited to get into something that Menno's been working on, a project, a regenerative land design project. And then Rob will be able to share his insights and experience with us into the steps and the process of, what it is to go and design a land project of your own. Without further delay, let's welcome Menno and Rob. If you could both introduce yourselves, let's go ahead and start with Menno first.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Menno. I've been into the refi space for a couple of years now, into Web3 since 2017. As Ben introduced, I'm working on a eco-friendly land design project in France, which is still fairly early stages. And I prepared a little presentation with the steps that I've undertaken, and also a couple of things I've learned along the way. And I hope to share some insights with you. And Rob will provide his decade-long, or maybe 2 decades by now, expertise in permaculture design and engineering. So Rob, if you can take it over from here, then I can present after you.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to hear from your partner too, because she's the partner in crime there that has to work with all your designs, or maybe you guys are designing them together.
Yeah, I didn't say that I was going to join beforehand, but then I just decided that I was going to join. So hi, my name is Jocelyn, and we're working on this project together. So far, Menno has been working primarily on the designs, but we chose the land because it's adjacent to my parents' house, where they've lived for the past 20 years. And so that's like a big part of it, as well as my family's there. I grew up there. I know the area quite well, and that's part of it.
Those are important details.
Those are important details. Yeah. And well, maybe I could just say something about myself. I was a Scrum Master. I am a yoga teacher. I'm between careers at the moment, currently working at this yoga retreat center in the kitchen for the next 2 months. And then after that, we're going to be on the land for the winter. So trying to make progress there on whatever we can. So that's where we're at the moment.
Pardon my ignorance, but by Scrum Master, you mean like for software development, not in the rugby Scrum. Okay.
No. Yeah, Scrum Master Agile Coach is what I was doing for a good 5 years there. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. We might need an Agile coach at some point. Maybe we can do a session at Fifth World about what it means to run a Scrum. Okay, my name is Rob Avis. I'm a mechanical engineer. I recently took the title of different titles, so Chief Engineering Officer at Fifth World. I've been designing regenerative systems for just over 15 years. And we're going to go through Menno's design today and give him a bit of feedback, and hopefully you guys can learn from just some basic design skills in terms of laying out property, and talk about why we think about it this way. Some of the stuff I talk about today is going to seem really simple, like stupid simple, but the reality is that most present day design does not think this way, and we'll talk a little bit about why. I guess I should just state some of my biases up front, just so that you guys know what to expect. Everything that I think about kind of comes through the lens of energy and entropy. And so my goal is to basically try and minimize the amount of energy that goes into systems, maximize the amount of energy that those systems collect. Because ultimately, I think energy is the keystone element in any system. It's the element that runs our bodies. We need energy for our bodies to operate. It's the element that operates our properties. most present day design doesn't really take this into account because we assume that energy is available at whatever amount we want, and it's ostensibly free, which it actually is. People complain about the cost of gasoline or petrol, natural gas or electricity, but when we look at the amount of energy or work that energy does for us, and just a quick example of that, a barrel of oil, 50 gallons, 200 liters is about 25,000 man hours of labor. So if you take an $80 barrel of oil and you divide it by 25,000 hours, you're literally getting deployable labor at less than a cent on your property. That's fine as long as energy is inexpensive or free or cheap. But if energy ever gets more expensive into the future, designing our homes, our food systems, our water systems, our energy systems, our transport systems around free energy is not a really great idea. And the good news is that we can actually design systems that are much more effective in their use of energy. Another bias that I'll state is that I'm pro all life. So I don't really classify some plants better than others necessarily. I don't really believe in invasive weeds or native plants. I believe plants are adapted to this planet and they live in a whole variety of places, and we can use those plants in a variety of different ways. And if there's any other like key biases that I'll bring up that need to be brought up, I'll bring them up as we go. So I think to get started, I'd like Menno to just share his design. Menno, if you want, I'm not sure what you designed it in, but if you have any PDFs or JPEGs are probably easier. I can also pull up my iPad. You can also send me the GPS coordinates of your property if we need to hop into Google Earth Pro and take a look at things there. But why don't you start with your design brief? I'd love you to start at a really high level. So what are your goals and objectives? Both of you can speak because you're both representing those. And then I'd also love to hear, so once you've heard about your goals, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the climate and the geography of the area. So what does your winter look like? What does your spring look like? What does your summer and fall look like in that bioregion? How close are you to kind of any major geographic locations? And then some of your business objectives. So just like really high level, kind of the big nuts and bolts that are going to inform the smaller nuts and bolts down below.
Absolutely, yeah. I can share my screen because I did prepare a bit of a presentation, and I think it's also valuable for the community just to see the process from like a more general perspective as well. So I'm just going to share my screen if that's allowed here. There we go. Then can you guys see my slides?
Yep, you bet.
Amazing. So yeah, so the location of my particular project is about an hour and a half northeast of Bordeaux. It's the biggest city in the region. Angoulême, which is the capital of the area, is about an hour north. And the bioregion indeed is zone 9A according to this map, and I think it's plantmaps.com. It's a very useful resource, and which basically means it goes down to -5 to 10 degrees Celsius, 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter. And
yeah, I will say in practice, it very rarely gets down to -10. Like probably -5 would be the max that it would get down in my living memory for the last, whatever it is, 20 plus years that I have been in that area. And I don't know if you're going to give more context on the climate, but I can say from my own experience what that's been like.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then we can go into goals as well, because we need to hit that part. But so the winters are generally pretty wet, but mostly from January, February onwards. So before that, it'll be, you know, mild-ish, getting down to freezing in December. I think we've had snow, like, maybe in the past it was once every 3 or 4 years, but in the past 5, 6, 7 years we haven't had any, I don't think. And usually we have flooding in February. So the local, there's a local pizza place which is by the river, like on a beach side, and they every year have to remove all of the stuff from their kitchen to avoid damage from floods. And like there's a local supermarket right by the water as well that every year has to renovate because it gets flooded every year. So that's a regular occurrence. And then it starts getting sunnier and drier from April onwards. Summers can get really hot. They've always been hot, and what I would consider would be, yeah, like up to 30 degrees. And to be honest, it does get up to 30 degrees every summer, and it's been like that since I've lived there. Yeah, pretty much every summer. We have on and off wet Augusts. So it'll be, usually we'll have, you know, like hot, 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 and then we'll have a storm break, and then hot, 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 and then a storm break for August. And some of September as well, and then it starts getting cooler. The last couple of years we've had hotter Octobers, like my parents have been in the pool until October, and very little wind. We notice we put a weather station up on the land and we don't have very much wind. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
yeah,
with those storm breaks, are they convectional in nature, or are they actually low pressure systems? Like, do you get thunderstorms?
Yeah, we get thunderstorms.
Okay, so it's not like you get like sucked in for weeks on end in August. No. It's just like, okay.
We get a couple, yeah, like a day or two of storms, and then it goes back to hot, and then the cycle continues. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
Another important aspect when you're designing your land is contour lines. So I put up a basic map here from a resource that Verse Permaculture that Rob founded has offered. So it's also very useful to both have a more local view as well as like a more zoomed out view, as I showed here on these pictures. Because the zoomed out view gives you, as you can see, if you can see my mouse, a good impression of like, whoa, this is like the valley here, and then there's like some hills here, and the water flows obviously from the high point to the low point. And our property is right here on a piece of slope as well. So that's also important to take into account with water management.
Yeah, and just to say that right here in the lowest point is a little lake, and it was definitely built by farmers, and they use it for irrigation. I don't know how long it's been there, but there's one little lake actually up here, and then it funnels down into the larger one here, and it fills up over winter, and then they empty it out over summer when they water the crops. And so nearby, it's all around us it's a mixture of fields and forest, and the fields do a rotation of corn, maize, and sunflowers. And other than that, it's forest. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go back there for a second. A couple of interesting things on this picture here. So that's a north-facing slope then, northwest facing. Is that correct? That you guys are on?
Where's north in there?
Well, north is up.
Yeah. So your slope is kind of northwest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you'll notice that the red is high, the blue is low. And this is for you guys, but also everybody on the call. And so you guys are actually likely in the sweet spot on this particular hill. And I'm just curious if you guys have ever walked from the bottom of the valley to the top of the peak there in the middle of the day.
Not really. It's also forest there. I can give you.
That's okay.
Yeah, there's a zoomed out view as well from a drone shot that sort of shows the hamlet as well.
Okay, well that's all good. That's all good. I think you should try that this summer when you're there. Try it several times through the summertime. And what you're probably going to notice, I'd love to hear what you guys find afterwards. You can send me an email, or you can put it up into the V DAO and tag me. But my suspicion is that right around where you guys are located, you're going to be in a bit of what's called a thermocline. And so you'll actually, if you walk with a short sleeve shirt on, you're going to detect a cold zone. You're going to probably be in the kind of middle warm zone, and then as you get to the top, you'll hit another cold zone. You have to try this at different times of the day. Every region's a little bit different, but when we're looking for properties, one thing we can do to dramatically reduce the energy consumption of the house, to increase the microclimates on the property, to push the boundaries with regards to what you're capable of growing. We want to try and find properties in that middle area. And so you get a bit of an inversion. And the inversion is located in different places depending upon the topography of the area. And I think you guys are probably perfectly located in that inversion zone. You are facing north-northwest, which means that it could be beneficial. It can also be detrimental. It can be beneficial because you're generally going to feel like your property has more moisture than a south-facing slope, because you have less evaporation coming off of your property, because the way that the sun hits it is going to be different than a slope that's facing towards the south. So in my climate, because we're very dry here, a north slope makes it seem as though I'm in a wetter climate than a south slope. And so you end up with a slightly kind of wetter soil than if we had located you closer to the bottom of that map there with a south-facing slope, which is probably very dry and has very different speciation in that region. So just a couple of quick observations that we can get without even going to the landscape. One of the things that we spend a lot of time on is reading the landscape, because that gives us a lot of clues with regards to what is possible on your particular property. So thanks for getting that prepared for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that is very useful is a sun path and a windrows. These are general ones from Angoulême, which is a major town about an hour north from where we are located. And if you're choosing a location yourself, you can already look these things up online before you even do a site visit, to get a little bit of information about your property as well. And it's also recommended, which I learned, is to use multiple cities in your region, just to get a little bit better view, especially with windroses. And then I've put links to these sites below in the sheets, which I think the deck will be shared on our Discord. So if anyone is interested in looking it up for their own project, they can.
So if you look at this windrows and then go back to your map, that's why you guys don't get a lot of wind there, is that you guys have got a lot of shelter coming from the surrounding topography. I think, anyways. I'd have to.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We're in a valley, basically.
Yeah. And as Jocelyn mentioned earlier, we were able to put up a weather station from the get-go when we purchased the land. So we actually have real data, and in the later slide, there's an actual windrows of the data of the last 6 or 7 months or something. So my recommendation, if you can afford it and you have the ability to connect it to some kind of power, put up a weather station on your local property as soon as possible, because it gives really valuable information for your property. We did a site survey as well, even though it's like right next to Josh's parents' place, but we did it just before we purchased the property, and used this AR app just to see the wind, the sun locations, or I say it, the sun movements.
Arc. Yep.
Yeah, which is also recommended if you're looking for a piece of land. So these are some general tips for people that in the community that like to also purchase a piece of land. And then now to our actual property details. So it's about 1 acre. As Josie mentioned, it's located in a rural / agricultural place with heavy clay soil. We have connection to power and water from the grid, but a septic system needs to be installed separately. And the history was that it had been untouched for about 10 to 15 years. So when we purchased it 2 years ago, first thing we did was put up a weather station. And then also it took us a while, because we haven't been there full time, to manually clear the land, because there are grasses up until knees and brambles 2 meters high covering entire trees. So it took us a while to clear that by hand. And one of the reasons why we chose to do it by hand and not, renting a tractor or getting someone in with big machinery, is to not damage the soil underneath.
And the trees that we might find, and we did find a lot of smaller and also like fairly large trees that we didn't realize were hidden under all of that sort of brush. So it was very valuable to sort of like fine detail clear it.
Yeah. And keep vegetation that is interesting. And then we
do you have a slide for our goals?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We're getting there. Okay. So this is like a general graphic about permaculture design cycles, which Rob knows more about, but I just put this up just to show that there's different frameworks that basically say the same thing, but with slight variations. So if you're looking to design your own piece of land, then these types of frameworks can be very useful. And so one of the first things in those frameworks is to set up vision, goals, and in our case also a feature list. So our vision for the longer term is to create a regenerative yoga retreat center up to host groups up to 15 people, focused on yoga and meditation. And one of the goals is to create a place where people can be connected to themselves, to others, and to nature. And the property should produce some of its own food, but it's not the main focus. So it's not a commercial farm or a market farm. We envision that we have, different varieties of apple trees and pears and local fruit trees that, if guests are there, can literally experience plucking it from the tree that most people never have done, right? So most food comes from the supermarket, right? So we would like to give our guests the experience of being able to harvest fruit, especially from the trees directly. And we also included some keywords, including safety, comfort, mindful, and delicious fresh food. Anything to add?
Yes, please. I just hearing about this, because I wasn't involved in the preparation of this, and I'm thinking about when we first met. We've been together for 6 years, and I think it was on our second date or something. I remember we were walking along the canal in Utrecht where we lived, and we were talking about like, okay, what is your like craziest, most wildest dream that you could think of? And we basically said to each other, and we kind of agreed on it, even though we hadn't discussed it beforehand. This is where I really realized, like, oh, we have a really shared vision for where we want to go in life, is that we were both dreaming about building a place where we could experience peace and abundance in these ways, sort of like natural, simplistic, natural beauty kind of peace, and to be able to share that with other people, like to just have this, basically like sanctuary of nature. That's why we use the word sanctuary as well, where people can just be free, be together, and enjoy natural beauty, and it just like simple things in life. So that's what I think it boils down to. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And because this is a very big project, instead of just one house, we want to accommodate for larger groups as well. So we made a feature list with different priorities and different phases, which you can see a screenshot of in this slide as well.
Yep.
And so,
can you guys just talk a little quickly about safety and security? What does that mean to you guys?
Yeah, this became very clear during the pandemic to both of us, that the systems that support our daily existence are fragile. And it's scary to think that we rely, almost exclusively on external systems that we have no control over for, really basic things: water, heat, food, things that we need to be alive. And so that was, again, like one of the impetuses for us to go out and then buy land, is to say, like, okay, we want to be able to rely on ourselves a bit more, like not completely 100% self-sufficiency is not the goal, but at least to have some backups there, just in case, because the world is becoming more unstable. We don't know what the future is going to look like. And we want to set up some systems so that we can feel a bit more safe and secure, that we're going to be able to look after ourselves and the people that we love around us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Certainly. Thank you.
Yeah. For me, it boils down to a certain sense of self-reliance in terms of like shelter, food, and water and energy. And it doesn't have to be 100%, but if you can do 50% in these aspects in life, I think you're a lot more resilient than when something happens.
Yep.
So after having defined those goals and visions and a feature list, we made a base map with a drone shot, like as you see on the screen, and we collected the data from our weather station. So here's the actual windrows, which matches up fairly well compared to the one from Angoulême, which is about an hour away, and I showed earlier. But it's a little more accurate, obviously. But it has to be said that this is only from basically over the winter, whilst Angoulême, the windrows that I showed earlier, was like 10 years of data all mashed together. And also here is a temperature and rain graph. So those are valuable data points for creating a for the permaculture journey that we're on. And so we did also some sector mapping with creating a sun angle lines, and
where the sun path is, where it goes.
Exactly. And the orange line is the summer sun, and the blue line is the winter sun. So those are also important aspects and sectors to take into account. And here again, the contour map, as well as the circular rings of zones, basic zones, where we want to put a shelter. And so then we come to the design idea. So one of the first things I did myself was to have that feature list and put all the elements into a really rough design. And once I did that, and I did it in Figma, I could create lots of copies. And so I iterated and like changed around locations and of certain elements, which then gives a bit of an idea of like, oh, how does the grand vision fit together? And eventually we also got in touch with a local permaculture designer, and we've had a couple of meetings with him, and he really focused on the WAS, which stands for Water, Access and Structures, and laid out a swill system for us, which I integrated in the latest version of the design, which I can now open in Figma, and then you can give your feedback on that, Rob, if you please. So here we are in Figma, and this is one of the latest versions of the design that we have laid out.
Can they read it?
Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Is that zoomed in enough?
Yep.
So I can give a 1 minute explanation, and then Rob, I'm very curious to your views with all the context that we've presented before. So I can start in the top part. So the idea is that the top part is dedicated
It's
to.
actually lower. It's actually lower than the.
But the northern part of the property.
It's northern, but so contour wise,
it's
lower.
lower.
But anyway,
yeah. That's a good remark. Anyway, so the northern part is dedicated to the guests, basically, with potential cabins, a septic tank system, and a small house that is one of the first things we want to put there for ourselves to live in whilst we expand the rest of the property. Composting shed here, and again, this whole side is higher than the point, basically. And then the lower part can be dedicated as a main house eventually, with also a composting area and some food forests or veggie patches, and a natural pool and sauna area in this corner. And so the swale system that our permaculture designer has thought out is basically starts at this compost area, which is one of the highest points on the property, which can bring nutrient-rich water from the composting area to the border of the property.
Can I just say, I don't know if everyone knows what a swale is. Is it worth explaining?
Yeah,
okay.
So go ahead.
Just because it follows contour lines, so that means that where that line is going from the compost area down, this whole line is all level, and the idea is that you dig out a ditch and you put that earth on the other side of it, and so you put the ditch part on the higher part, and then the water that
we lose Menno.
I think we did. I was wondering if it was my internet. So what she was saying is that a swale is basically a ditch that's dead level. So in the same way that when you fill a bathtub, the water fills the entire bathtub simultaneously, a swale kind of operates in the same way. And so it allows you to put overflow over a very long ditch, so to speak, essentially a bathtub for maximum water infiltration. So you can Google that. There's lots of stuff on swales online. Yeah, no worries.
I think the screen share is still working, so I wonder if they'll pop back up in a moment. I guess must be having some connection issues.
Yeah, maybe it's all those solar flares. And Al, those are really important questions. Setbacks are really important. I'm not sure what their land use bylaw would stipulate, but typically there is a setback requirement. So permanent structures anyways, where I'm from, would typically have to have a setback from the property line. I don't think decks would be a big deal, but houses and maybe a swimming pool, depends on how permanent that is.
What about Al's question about the wind tunnels being created by valley situations?
Yeah, that can be it. I mean, typically what happens in valleys, so it's going to be a function of what the kind of annual wind patterns look like, which will dictate that. But valleys actually have really interesting daily patterns. And so you usually get air moving up the valley during the morning as things warm up, and then air tumbling down the valley at night, which can also be a really important observation because it can affect frost development, and you can use it to your advantage. It can also be a disadvantage as well. So local observation is really important.
Well, thanks a lot, Rob. While we're waiting for them to join back in, we're going to have a recording of this. So I'm wondering if there's any aspects of the design that are on the screen now that you'd like to talk to, or anything that came up previously that you'd like to talk to. We can share that recording with Menno after.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I really, really liked how they did their sector and zone analysis. I think it was really valuable. It's great that they've got their contour map. One thing that I'll say on a property of this size, I don't have their full explanation on their swale, and I need to see their swale relative to their contour map. Generally on smaller properties like this, they can be a little bit disruptive in terms of how the landform operates. And if we look at an earlier slide that Menno showed, their rainfall on an annual basis in this property based upon their weather station is almost a meter, which is insane. It's a lot of water. And so they have similar evaporation constraints to me, a little bit more, not much, with 3 times the amount of rainfall. So one thing that I always want to ask myself when we're applying any kind of ideas or any of these permaculture systems, because we're talking about permaculture today, but it could be an engineering system too. What's my limiting factor? What's my weak link? What's the thing that's going to prevent me from succeeding? And as Menno said, water access structures is really important, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to put broad, like large water harvesting features into the landscape. There's Menno right now. You back with us, Menno? Oh, you can unmute yourself.
There
Hey, there we are.
Yeah,
And,
I'm sorry for that.
We just finished the design, and so we're gonna go head on with our day. And thanks for joining us, folks. So what I was saying, actually, I'm gonna let you guys finish first, and then so you can share your screen again, and then I'll give you the feedback that I was just using to fill in the gap there.
Absolutely, yeah. Where did we drop off?
You guys were just explaining what a swale is.
Okay.
Just, not too bad then.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen again.
I'm listening. I just have to nip outside, but I'm listening, and so keep going. And I've seen your design, so just give me 2 seconds. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So we.
Should I finish explaining what a swale is? Just
well,
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
Anyway, never mind.
Does everyone understand what a swale is now?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, that's a good to have. So the idea is to bring some of the water from this high area here along this contour line, along this swale, to the border, and then across here over this main contour line, and can also be one higher up here to the other area. And so, and this thicker one is supposed to be a bigger one as well. And then the thinner one is a swale system that's a little bit smaller. With the idea of soaking all the water that is available into the land instead of having it just run off into the property of my partner's parents.
Cool. One of the things that Rob was mentioning when you guys got cut off was about the amount of water that is coming onto your land. Like, it's quite a wet area, right? Like from a climate point of view, there's a lot of rainfall.
Yeah, well,
There has been this year.
it's about 1,000 millimeters a year, I think. So, yeah. But mostly throughout the winter season, indeed, like from November up until April or something.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you guys want to share a little bit more about the design, or are you looking? Like, we got 15 more minutes. So, which parts do you want me to focus on, or are there a few more pieces that you guys want to share?
Well, maybe just to recap, what we were talking about was the fact that Menno's design has focused on water access structures. So in collaboration with the permaculture designer we're working with, he helped us to think about and integrate these two swales and this sort of like flow over point, which is I like the idea of there being a little stream going next to the yoga deck, so it serves multiple functions. It'll have a cooling effect, hopefully, and will also just carry water down to where we need it, which is this area with the natural pool, and then it will carry on to the rest of the property. And with the added benefit of if we have a compost area here, the nutrients will also be spread throughout the land. So that was part of the idea. And there's alternatives for this swale. It could be a little bit higher, depending on multiple factors. And then, yeah, this, I think we already talked about this. The road would be here. It's going to be quite sloped. And then we kept sort of the guests on one side and ourselves on the other, just for privacy reasons. Like, yeah, we don't want to fully integrate, like if we're going to be hosting retreats, having people looking into our kitchen window every morning. So yeah, I think that's the main thing.
And some of the challenges that we have is we don't know whether this access road is allowed, because our land is about 2 meters higher than the road that runs basically here. So if allowed, we would need to dig out a big piece of earth just to make a driveway, which then means also slope here, which can have a water runoff effect, which you don't really want, and also like a bit of a cliff on this side. So that's one sort of challenge. And an alternative access route would be from the sort of parking area here across this border, but we try to minimize the amount of driveway to increase the amount of other things we can put on our property. A second challenge is the cabin area here, because this is an area where currently there are quite a few small fruit trees, and some pretty vegetation that we ideally want to keep. It has to be said that these cabins will probably take 5 years plus to build. So in the meantime, they can still exist. And the same for the main house. This whole area is the main shady area of the property. And if we were to build a main house in this area, a lot of these trees and shade and like the microclimates here will have to be removed. So those are some of the challenges as well. So like we want a lot of elements, but how to balance that with existing vegetation.
What species are those trees that you're removing?
Yeah. Okay, so in the cabin area, we have a lot of plums. We have like a main mother plum tree in the center, and then all around her are like a bunch of the tiny, they're like 2.5 meter tall plum trees. We have a pear. We have, I don't know if we have an apple here, but we definitely have a ginkgo bilboa that was planted by someone a long time ago. Its trunk is about this thick, so it's pretty hefty. It's like 5 meters tall, and next to that is an even taller cherry tree, which is also pretty cool. And then we've got some hazelnut trees, or like a clump of hazelnut there.
Yeah. And then on this side, it's a lot of oaks and also some cherry trees, I think.
No, it's not oaks. There's
Also
here.
oaks.
Here that is a big oak, and then we've got a couple of oaks over here, and then these are mostly walnuts, apples, and plums as well. I don't think there's any oaks in there. This is a walnut.
Walnut.
Yeah, walnut. Walnut. This is a line of cherries over here, and then plums. I think this is also plum, and then an apple tree.
Yeah.
There's like 2 very old apple trees in there, and these little ones are oak. I think babies of this one. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, there's probably more pointers than I have time to give to you guys right now. So, but I'll try and go through them quickly. So when you guys dropped off there, we'd need to look at your contour map relative to where you're talking about putting your swale. But my sense is there's a couple of conflicts there. One, like you guys get 1,000 millimeters of almost 1,000 millimeters of rain per year, and so your evaporation is probably a little bit more than mine, but you get 3 times the rain that I do, and so I'm not 100% sure that you actually need that, and so there may be an opportunity to 250 square meters, just to give you a sense. That main house there, yeah, so it's going to be 1630 40 plus 250, so almost 300. So yeah, like just on the main house in the garage there, you're looking at about 300,000 liters of water per year.
How many liters?
300,000. Which is a good case. There's a good case to be made. Wow, that tea turned into coffee. They must not have got the instructions. Anyways, still nice to have service. So while let's just back up for a second here. So when you described your weather system, I asked you whether or not you guys had low pressure systems in August or whether they were convectional. And so you guys live in a typical true Mediterranean climate, which means that you have wet winters and dry summers. Now, swales are really effective at storing that large volume of water in those wet seasons. And then as you build soil carbon, you build resilience and water storing capacity in the soil. So there's a lot of benefits to those sorts of things. They can break your property up, especially on smaller properties like this. And so I need a little more detail on what you guys were thinking about in terms of what that swale is going to look like. Is it a weeping tile with some mulch around it? Is it a full ditch? And I would probably lean you away from that just because, again, it's going to break your property up quite a bit. The other thing is that your compost area, you probably don't want effluent from your compost ending up in your natural swimming pool. You'll end up with an anaerobic situation there. And so while the idea is really great to move that nutrient around, I would want to kind of focus the nutrient into that food forest just below it. And there may also be a way of transporting, like maybe you can bring some of your growing systems closer together so that you can benefit from that water overflow. And so again, we'd have to do a little bit more of a deep dive on your contours, and possibly some photography would be beneficial to help think through how we manage water. In your climate, like above grade tanks are really inexpensive, and so storing larger. We have a really great tool actually at Verge that uses big data. So we can put 30 years of daily rainfall into this. And what it does is most of the rainwater harvesting analysis that's done, they use a monthly analysis, and it's not actually very effective. And so when we're talking about rainwater storage, we want to basically work the tanks as hard as possible. So the way that we do that, when we look at daily rainfall numbers over 30 years, we can look at the probabilistic chance of at various volumes of storage of not having enough rainwater at certain times of the year, and then we can play around with increasing roof area or increasing tank size. My hunch is that we could set up an overflow system on your tanks there, benefit that food forest, increase the tank storage, reduce the disruptiveness of a swale, and get all the same benefits. And then as you build those cabins out, we could put distributed storage over there as well for any of the activities going on that side of the property. And then because you're already talking about phyto remediation on your septic system, you have a whole other, assuming that the land use bylaw and the laws allow for this, you can put in a sludge hammer or septic genie. I like the name septic genie better. It makes me think of magic. And you can upgrade your septic effluent and then tie that into a drip irrigation system. Netafim, which is a what's the name of the Jewish company, builds a subsurface irrigation system that you could run off of that septic effluent to feed your food forest. So I guess, like, at the end of the day, I don't think water is going to be your limiting factor. And I think you actually have lots of it, probably. So those are my thoughts on that. I'll just give you a couple other little pointers, and then you guys can give me some feedback. Hopefully we can get to that before we're out of time here. So with regards to the parking lot and the driveway, those are prime opportunities to harvest water. And so if you were going to put any swales in, your parking lot would be designed in a way that I think it's actually probably downslope from your food forest. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's okay. So that'll be a bit challenging, but you could possibly design the parking lot with, if you can get the slopes right, with rain gardens along the edges. And so your food forest could be extended, or you could have nut or fruit trees on the fringe of your parking lot to put the harvested water off of the parking lot to productive use. And the same thing if you looked at your setbacks on your driveway as well, which might actually give you favor with the local municipality if they are seeing that you're managing your stormwater on site. And so rain gardens could be a really good option. There may be also an opportunity to tie into a contour line as well, potentially to manage it. I actually think you're going to have more water than you know what to do with on this property with all of the hard surfaces that you're placing on here. So again, swale might be the option, but there's lots of other water harvesting systems out there that might be, like, I don't know that I'd want to have a swale going right through my veggie patch, for example.
Yeah.
So anyways, those are just that's my feedback. The site looks awesome. I like that you guys have split kind of the community area and your area. I think that's really important. And I definitely hear you on the one thing that you might want to play with here, assuming the setbacks, is that you might move your veggie patch and your yoga and then put your house there. Like, you might want to play around with those two aspects, because you could potentially get a much better passive solar house design with the house facing southeast. Like, with the way that your house is oriented right now, you're actually, it's like the perfectly wrong, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just like you're not optimizing for solar gain in the winter time there. Your house is going to be colder in the winter and hotter in the summer, because you're going to get all that westerly sun coming in. But if you orient the house, you rotate it 90 degrees and put it to the north of the property there, you're going to benefit from passive solar gain in the summertime. You're going to get solar rejection in the wintertime. And then if you have your natural swimming pool higher up, it can actually benefit from the overflow of your you might be able to keep the natural swimming pool there and have it benefit from the tanks. The one disadvantage, though, which we'll have to think a little bit about, is how to benefit the gravity flow that you've set up there on the top corner. So that's not insurmountable, but something we need to think a little bit about. So just a couple of, like, normally I would give weeks of time into laying stuff out. And so these are just like initial thoughts, having met with you a month ago, and then based on what you presented today, that come to mind as I take a look at your design.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I stopped sharing my screen because it's about time. So thanks again. And like, Ben, do you want to give an outro? I'm not sure if there's any questions, but like,
well, and I just want to say, like,
needs...
I feel really bad about giving you like the 10-minute rundown on your property. So if you guys need to ask any other questions, I don't want to send you away with just some random pieces of advice without enough context. So feel free to get in touch with Ben or myself, and we can chat some more. Because the worst thing that can happen is you can misunderstand what I've said, and then go and apply something. It's like, oh, Rob said this, and it's not quite what I meant, or whatever. And then, so happy to figure something out offline. You can ask me some additional questions when I have more than 10 minutes to give to you.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, thank you so much.
The main takeaway for us is to also explore other water harvesting options. That's very valuable. So thank you so much, Rob, for that.
And the placement of the house. I mean, that's coming later, but still very useful, and it's food for thought. That's what I really take it as. It's like extra information for us to then go and think about, and like, we're not going to take this as gospel and then go apply it. It's like, okay, like, let's figure this into our whole thinking system. Thank you very much.
And like, I love swales all day long, but the problem with permaculturists is that most of them will put the swales in every possible location that they can. And so it's water harvesting, infiltration, yes, but there's lots of different ways to look at doing that. And sometimes the best way is just building the soil carbon. Like the best water harvesting features are sometimes just a flat piece of land with a bunch of soil carbon in it.
Yeah.
So like adding diversity to your grasses, for example, is actually a water harvesting technique. So how to do the maximum amount of benefit with the least amount of movement. It's pure Tai Chi, really, at the end of the day. So it feels a bit forced to have that element there.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you very much for that feedback. It was very useful.
Yeah, I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I'm just really curious about this question that came up in the chat. I just wonder if you guys could maybe answer it briefly. It's about like the building permits and stuff. Like, I was asking like about, is there any limitations on that in terms of your design? Like, have you had to speak to planning about that for where you put your buildings, and do they need to be set back a certain distance from your boundary and stuff? I think that was the main question.
Yes. Short answer, yes, there are limitations, and no, we're not 100% sure that we're able to build where we want to build. And I know that like the bylaws, as you would call them, say that you have to build 3 meters away from your border, and they can only be so high, or there's all these rules. But a lot of it in our area is based on what the municipality says. So if the municipality agrees with it, then it's cool. And like, it has to fit in with the local environment. So does it stand out too much? Okay, no, then we're not going to do that. And is it close to other houses? Now, for us, we're between my parents' house and the other houses, so that's not going to be too much of an issue. However, we have run into the issue that in our design, what you saw as the top part was the part that was technically allowed to be built upon in the past. There was like a preliminary building permit on that part, but not on the part which is the part that we want to build our main house on. And we think, we're not exactly sure, but we think it's because there's a municipal water pipe running through that part of the land, and the municipality doesn't know where it is. They don't want to have to deal with it, so they say, okay, you go closest to the road, which also is handy because then we're closer to the access road, to electricity, to water, so it makes sense in that sense. But we're going to have to do a little bit of fighting, I think, for it, and maybe we're not going to get what we want. So yeah.
Super interesting. I think there's lots more to discuss here, and like Al, who's been asking lots of questions, I know he's got a lot of experience in this area. There's other people in the DAO who do too, so maybe this conversation will continue in the DAO to some extent. That this video will be shared on YouTube as well, so there might be questions that come up within the community, and I'd love to see like how your design evolves over time as well. So maybe we can organize for you to come back in the future and share an update on how things are going. This is really an amazing design you put together. Thanks so much for sharing it today.
you're most welcome, and thank you for the opportunity. And I love to share in a couple of months or half a year any progress, and
or a year, or in 5 years.
Yeah, keep posting in DAO as well, so in Discord. So thanks again, everyone, for showing up.
Thank you.
Cool.
Lovely to be here.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Have a great
Thank
rest of your day. Bye.
Take
Cheers.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.